Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And you guys are not going to believe who I have on the show today. I have the one and only Mr. Pat Hilton on the show, and he is the marketing EntrepreTainer. I think I got it right. So, hey, stay with us. We'll be right back. And we are back. Let me bring Pat on. Pat, I saw you dancing backstage, dude.
Oh, that's a nice groovy intro there. I like that.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate that. So coming from you, that means a lot, for real.
That's smooth. I like it. I like it.
Thank you. So we have some rock stars already joining us here on the live stream. Pat, you know, I created this show. It's literally been, I think almost, I got to go look, man. I don't know the exact date, but it was April 3 years ago that I created this show. And it's all about helping people get unstuck. Have you ever been stuck in life?
Oh yeah, plenty of times.
Sure. So it's about, like, you know, telling your story and you know, kind of sharing how you got through the ups and downs. And so let's start with where you were born and raised.
So St. Louis, Missouri. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up. My parents met, I believe, at a Led Zeppelin concert. I think my dad jumped on the hood of the car drunk and met my mom, and she was like, "Oh, I'm never going to date that guy." And here we are 40 years later or whatever it is. So, you know, old school parents, but my dad had a big, huge record collection. And that's why I brought up the Led Zeppelin thing. And so when I was growing up, I used to listen to a lot of like orchestra and jazz music and like Herbie Hancock and Maynard Ferguson and Earth, Wind and Fire and all kinds of really good stuff, the OJs. And, you know, I like the classic rock, your Boston and your Skinner and all this kind of stuff. And it really kind of, you know, gave me a lot of views on culture, and how I went about my life was very musical. There's always something playing in my head. And when you're a kid, people tell you you're crazy when you say that out loud. Oh, he's got something playing in his head. There's got to be something wrong with this guy. Plus, he's super hyper. So he's obviously not like everyone else. And so I think that one of the things I learned later in life was that not being like everyone else is good. Being different and being unique makes you stand out. And if you're not standing out in today's marketing world, you're not breaking through walls. And so the whole point of us, people like Ken and I, collaborating and supporting each other is that we lift each other up. And so I appreciate you giving me a platform to come on and inspire others to just be them. And you're your best marketing advice. You can be you better than anyone else. So I always encourage people to embrace that, because it can be hard when you're growing up, and you know, St. Louis is like a little big town and where everybody knows everybody. And so it can be really challenging to progress when you're in an area where everyone's kind of inside a wall, like everybody's kind of shoved in together, and there's a lot of different viewpoints, but everyone wants to kind of walk the line. You don't really want to veer too far off the line or be too wild. And it's just like, I guess I just couldn't help it, Ken. I just couldn't help it.
Well, you know, I had, I don't know if you know this or not, I had Andy Frisella on the show, and I had his amazing wife, Emily, on, and they're from St. Louis. And is everybody in St. Louis just really intense, man? I kind of get that feeling.
Well, I think that this goes down the line again of what we were talking about before. I mean, you've sought out people that are pushing the line. You've sought out people that are going above and beyond. And that's who we surround ourselves with, because we want to constantly get better. And it's funny. I was actually talking to my wife this morning about Andy because I'm on the 75 hard. I'm on day 9. So, if he sees this, if he sees this, go check my 7-7 media. I'm sure you got access to it because my day 1 picture and my day 10 picture that I just took, like I'm already seeing results. And do I have to do that? No. I'm choosing to do that because I want to hold myself to a high standard this year, And so, like you said, there's some intense people, but we look for those people. We look for those challenges. We don't want to be the smartest person in the room. We want to be around people that force us to level up. And so that's the whole point of doing shows like this and to be interviewing people and getting around people is to get that information that we need to grow. And I think today in this day and age, that's like, it shouldn't be rare, but I guess it kind of is.
It is, dude. But let's go back to, I feel like that there's always a person or an event or something in our childhood that kind of pushes us in the direction that, I talk about this all the time, Pat, like, people need to learn how to just be themselves and break free from the freaking programming that somebody else gave them in childhood. What was it in your childhood that pushed you in the direction? I mean, I know you had the music and all of that, but was there anything else that comes to mind, like this person or event?
So it's kind of related to music, but it's also kind of related to education. So I went to Clayton grade schools in St. Louis, and they did some good things. They did some things right, and they did some things wrong, just like any education system, right? But one thing that they did right was this band class curriculum that they had. And so I love that this is live. Maybe she'll watch, maybe she won't. But I message her and tell her that I reference her on all these interviews. So there's this girl that I grew up with named Michelle Abrams, right? And Michelle Abrams, if you're on a test and you don't know the answers, you sit next to Michelle Abrams. Okay. She's like just that kind of gal, nice gal, smart gal, fun to be around. Like I grew up with smart people. And so I knew at a young age, where I wanted to be based on what the smart gals were doing. Rebecca Rothbaum, Michelle Abrams, and so we had a choice in 3rd grade. And since like I said, I was into music very young age as a kid, and my dad never let me touch the records, by the way, for anyone out there who was like, oh my God, his dad let him touch the Boston Pops record? No, he always did that. Right. But in 3rd grade, you had a choice. You could go to computer class or you could go to band class. All the smart girls were signing up for band class. So boom, picked up a trumpet because I thought, 3 buttons can't be that hard, right, Ken? 3 buttons. But what I didn't realize, and you probably know this, is that like all the major theme songs and all the major orchestral movements, the lead part is the trumpet part. So literally the hardest part, like Star Wars or Rocky Balboa or Back to the Future, any of those famous songs that were like themes of like my childhood movies, it's all a trumpet part that is the lead high major part. You know what I'm saying? Jurassic Park, all of that kind of stuff. And so naturally, I was like, 3 buttons can't be that hard, but it ended up being the hardest. And so here's where I kind of answer your question with that. In that class, he would give book exercises. My teacher was named Mr. Varley, and he would give us book exercises. And so like Michelle Abrams could always play hot cross buns perfectly. I never practiced hot cross buns. I was learning my own versions of like Star Wars and Rocky and, Jurassic Park and writing down what valve, like 2 and 3, 1, second, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 2 and 3. So I'd write down all the notes on my own little chart, and then I would play that for the test. And it got to a point where 3-6 months down the line, he'd be like, all right, well, Pat, what'd you learn this week? And I'd be like, man, I learned this Birdland song by Maynard Ferguson, which is, by the way, like an advanced jazz movement. And I'm like in 4th grade, and I don't even have a book for it. And I'm ripping Birdland off the top of my head. And the teacher's just like, oh my God. And then, okay, well, can you play exercise 23? And I'd butcher exercise 23, but I could rip a Maynard Ferguson jazz lick and play the high part. Like I could play like the middle part, then like raise up into the high part, which is really hard to play.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because he always encouraged me to be creative and to play that first. And no one else in the class could rip anything like that. But I always got like 5th or 6th chair because I couldn't play the exercise correctly. And he'd make us play these down the line in front of the entire class. And so I think that like build up and that you're doing a great job, I never got that from any other teachers in school. Wow. Social studies, it's like, oh man, I don't know. Pat doesn't pay attention well in social studies. Pat's just slow in math. You know, he's got learning disabilities and he's hyperactive and he's ADD. I was always an effing problem. Let's just be real. It's like you're always behind. And it's just like it got to a point where like Mr. Varley was like, I've never seen anybody do this. It's brilliant. Give me one of those songs, Pat, and then you got to play the exercise. You've been practicing the exercise? And he'd almost kind of chuckle because he knew I never practiced the exercise one time. But I could rip the main theme of Superman.
Right.
Which is not easy to play. It's way harder than Hot Cross Buns.
On a trumpet.
Right. But Michelle always got first chair because she could play Hot Cross Buns perfectly. But I think that the lesson is that like, I don't know that Michelle's goal was ever to make that a career. Like she's like a doctor at WashU or something now, which is, we're still friends on Facebook. That's why I always bring her up because I can like send her these clips and stuff and she still supports me. But it's interesting because that's all I wanted to do, man. That was the only positive feedback that I was getting in school. Wow. Was that's what you're great at. And so even out into my 20s and 30s, and like we talked about with the Grant Cardone situation, the way I got a hold of Grant was he posted on his wall, hey, I need to get verified on Instagram. You know, all you hustlers out there, you know, send me a poster, a soundbite or whatever, and I'll post it on my pages. And so I ripped a little verify Grant on Instagram song. And Elena got it to him. And what do you know? I'm in touch with his team about a potential performance. And, you know, the rest of the story is the way it was. I mean, that's how we kind of came across each other. And so I think that like she just said, Jill, like that Mr. Varley thing, until this day still impacts what I do with my career because he was the first guy that was like, dude, this is brilliant. You don't even have sheet music for this. By the way, valve 2 and 3, that's an A sharp. So you want to make sure that when you're filling out your charts, that's an A sharp. It's not valve 2 and 3. You know what I mean? I'm
Dude, like, that's my wife, by the way. My wife's watching.
No, it's valve 2 and 3, Mr. Var. You learned it backwards. You don't know what you're talking about. And so it was like a joke, but all the way up through 8th grade in this Clayton system. I mean, I could rip anything.
Wow.
It was amazing.
So
I also put in the work. I'd sit in the basement and mess it up for hours. Like if you ask my mom what the song Birdland is, she'd be like, oh my God, I can never hear it again and be happy.
That's so funny. So you took that through high school and did you go to college?
Yeah, so I went to a recording school in Arizona. And so we talked about that too. So I had to eventually have that conversation with my dad. So I went to CBC high school. So I went to Clayton grade schools and CBC high school. If you're a St. Louis person, you understand why I'm referencing all that. Like Andy went to Vianney. Like St. Louis people, it's like, where'd you go to high school? Like I met some girl in Dallas last week and I'm like, where'd you go to high school? And she's like, Ladue. And I'm like, CBC. It's just like a thing in St. Louis. If you're from St. Louis and you're watching, you know what I'm talking about. But so I went to CBC High. And then I went to Mizzou for one semester. And this was one of those examples of like playing it by the book.
Yeah.
My parents were like, you just need to go to the state college. You know, you can live with your best friend from high school and just pass your classes. And I wasn't doing very well in the classes. And I dropped a bunch of classes. So I didn't necessarily fail out. I have no idea what this guy's talking about. That's okay. So I didn't
I
mess
think
with
it's a referencing of
the 3 valves. Look it up, baby. 3 valves. So, I just wasn't doing well. So I dropped it and went to community college. And then I had to negotiate with my dad because I had already pitched my dad on, will you send me to this audio production school in Arizona? And he was like, no, I don't know. It's not really a real college. I'm like, okay, well, Dad, anytime I play it by the book, it doesn't work out. And that's why I brought up the Mr. Varley thing. I'm like, anytime people push me to go do my thing, it works. And so eventually he buckled and he sent me to Arizona to this production school for audio and video and backed me up on it. And we had a deal that if I graduate from the school, I go get a corporate audio job, a real job, and then he'll continue to help me, which pretty much meant Daddy Moneybags was going to get my back if something went wrong, as long as I went by his version of what the book was, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So this should help everybody now talking about what we're talking about, because everybody has been down this road. So I got the job, of course. I got great grades at this school. I excelled. I never missed one day of school in Arizona, graduated with like honors or whatever. And I went and I worked at this company in Las Vegas called Production Resource Group, PRG Audio. And I worked there for a while. I got some pretty big gigs. We did some pretty big corporate stuff. We built systems for Tom Petty. We built systems for Madonna, Depeche Mode, Billy Joel and Elton John dueling pianos. And so we built some of the biggest rock and roll touring systems that ever existed. Aerosmith. We built Rolling Stone systems in conjunction with another company, but it was still our gear. And so I learned how to build massive audio systems for the biggest rock and roll tours on the planet.
Wow.
And so my dad was very happy because I was working for a job, right? It was a job.
Right.
And then, I caught a wild hair up my ass and was like, well, I want to be Tom Petty. Right. So I quit the job.
Did you have a breakdown?
So I quit the job. And this was after meeting a lot of these people. And they were like, man, your personality, I mean, you should just go out and do your own thing. And so I quit the job based on some of the feedback that I got and moved back home. Yes. Conservatory of Recording Arts in Arizona, Greg. That's the place I went. And I graduated in like 2004. So yeah. And then I worked in Las Vegas. We did the big tours and we did the big systems. I quit and I moved back home and I didn't tell my dad that I quit. And I knocked on the door and I'm like, hey Dad, I'm back. I'm going to start my own touring business and I'm going to entertain and travel. It's what I've been doing on the off season of touring and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, you're not doing that here. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, like, I'm here, man. I mean, like, what? Come on, man. Welcome home. Right. And this is where I think that the spoiled kid that's a little bit of a dipshit gets a reality check by getting kicked in the nuts, because my dad was like, no, like, you're literally not living in my house and doing that. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? And he's like, you want to do that? That is breaking our deal. Our deal was you go to the conservatory school, you go get a corporate audio job, you build your way up in the system, you become a production manager, you get your own health insurance and like get married and have kids and like, that's your life.
Right.
You broke the deal. Okay. So if you want to do this, you go fund it. You go take care of it. You go make it happen, but you're not doing it in my house.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh dude, what? I'm like, let's not get ahead of ourselves here, Dad. Okay. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But this is why I brought up the story in grade school. I never got first chair because I didn't want to play by the rules of how the test worked. Right.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that I was, in my opinion, the best player in the room, according to the way that the grading scale worked, I was the 6th best out of 13.
Yeah.
So this was the same situation, despite the fact that I had worked all these huge tours, that I had all this experience now, that I was really, really good at computer systems and technology. It didn't add up in my dad's head. He's like, well, then if you're so great, you go figure it out on your own. And so things got really hard at that point because, I had two choices. I could either go back or I could find some kind of corporate gig using my dad's connections in St. Louis, which I didn't want to work for those people.
Right.
And so I went and called my friend Brad Griffin, who's on my Facebook page as well. And I said, hey, man, we're going to start a band. And he's like, okay, I'll play bass. And I'm like, I know. And so we started a band, and we literally, I was sleeping on his floor at the time. I had no computer, nothing. I would use his MacBook to learn how to design posters, and boom, we had the best posters in town. I would use his MacBook to like figure out how to draw up little videos, and boom, we had the best promos in town. 3 months later, we had a demo record that we recorded in our friend's garage, and we took our act all the way from St. Louis to Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood, and we were getting potential record contracts from, some pretty big companies, and so now a few years later, I decided that, I was pretty much doing most of the work. Brad went and joined the Army, my buddy Brad, so he wasn't in the band anymore. And so I went solo, and I became Pat, the marketing acoustic guy. And I was still sleeping on people's floors, living out of friends' basements, driving all over the country, traveling with Afro Man and Coolio and Cypress Hill as an opening act, and then doing all the marketing, all the ticketing, all the promos for these people.
Did you just say Coolio?
Coolio, you remember Gangster's Paradise?
Of course.
Dude, that's why I'm so good at rapping, because I smoked blunts in alleyways with Coolio for years.
Is that the genre that you were in?
No.
I can't see an acoustic rapper. Come on.
So no, it wasn't, but I was so good at marketing them and selling out venues with them that I mean, there were times where I was the only dude that looked like me in a venue.
Wow.
But I would go up there and just with me and a guitar, get people pumped up. So I was kind of like an intro act. It's just like you saw me do at 10X. It was only 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So that I'd go up there for like 10 minutes. I would mix in like gin and juice and like all kinds of stuff that played to that audience into my repertoire, and then sucker them in and then introduce the main act.
Gotcha.
So I would get it louder and louder and louder and louder. By 9.5 minutes, they're really feeling good, but it's also time to let go, because as an acoustic performer, it's kind of like background music, but I kind of like made it a show. And so I was pretty much the intro for these guys and the marketing guy. And then so once they came on stage, I would move back into the back and I would DJ for them. So I'd like hang the acoustic guitar on a stand and jump into the back and kick on their song. And then boom, like they were in action. So there was like no break. It like went together.
Wow.
Dude, it totally worked.
Dude, that is freaking awesome.
That's why you hear me on Clubhouse rapping and shit, because it's easy.
You know what? I don't think I've ever been in a Clubhouse room with you.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I like kick on beats and like make up raps and like introduce people and like room reset and all that stuff. It's funny.
That's awesome.
But
dude.
I had to figure out, how am I going to put all these talents together? Because corporate, I'm a sound guy, essentially. So how am I going to use the sound guy expertise to be an entertainer? But how am I going to be an entertainer and a sound guy if I can't market the show and get people into the audience? I've got to align myself with people that have a built-in audience. And Coolio and my buddy Joe, Afro Man, were the only people that would work with me because I was so out there.
Wow, dude.
So, dude, those kinds of, rap artists that were like, had super hot hits in like the mid 90s and early 2000s were the guys that were like, dude, we think you're great.
Yeah.
And so those guys kind of embraced my style, and, they got me way nicer hotel rooms than anybody else. So God bless them. So and they brought me up in the game.
You toured with Coolio.
Yeah, the Gangster's Paradise.
I think I was listening to Gangster's Paradise
in like 95,
a couple days ago.
Dude, it's a legendary track. He murdered that verse.
I know, man.
It's a shame that Weird Al did that did that Amish Paradise, because the Amish Paradise was so good. It kind of took a little heat off old Coolio. I think he's still a little bitter about that. I try to make sure I never bring that up around him.
That's funny, dude.
But those guys embraced the wildness. They were like, this is so wild. And as long as you keep it to 9 minutes and then jump back to the DJ rig and turn on the track, I don't see why it wouldn't work. And it totally worked.
So tell me this, because there's a similar situation I had when I left home at 17, because I was going to go, do the adult thing. I was tired of the rules. And I remember going 3 days without food, and I knock on the door going, "Hey, Mom." And she's like, "Oh no, you wanted to be a man. Now go be a man." And I was like, wow. So I haven't eaten in 3 days. It probably wasn't 3 days, but
it felt like it. I know that feeling.
It was probably like 5 hours or something.
I know.
You start freaking out like, oh God, I don't have any money and I got to eat.
Die.
But so talk about the moment that your dad showed some tough love and said no. How resentful were you in that moment?
I was super pissed. And I was like, and again, and that's why I bring it up that, I went to great grade schools, went to a private Catholic high school. He totally paid for me to go to the studio school and all of this kind of stuff. That's why I make sure that I draw that out for people, because I had a lot going for me. But I think that as that happened, like the business landscape was changing. It was becoming way less suit and tie and way more alternative. It was becoming way more about like faces of brands rather than just like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and like Ford. It was way more like Justin Timberlake was a brand.
Yeah.
And like NSYNC and Universal like weren't. Like people were like, now everyone knows Elon Musk owns Tesla.
Right.
Now everyone knows that this person is associated with this hedge fund. And when they sold this amount of stocks right before it crashed, they made this amount of, like everyone knows that stuff now. But that transition was kind of happening, which is why I was like, this is how I pitched my dad. If you allow me to learn the skills behind, the video camera and the microphone and the production and how the stage works and all these things, I'll always have a gig. And while it was kind of tough for him to understand, he's like, okay, well, I mean, he's a numbers guy. So you can see him running the numbers in his head. Well, I mean, if he can get this and that and the other thing, maybe he makes $50,000, $60,000 a year, at least survive. You almost see him like the number crunching. He's like the Ben Matlock of accountants. And so it's just like, he gave me the benefit of the doubt, but I was pissed because I quit the corporate job and I asked him for help. And I thought, oh, well, he'll buy me the MacBook Pro and he'll buy me the microphone and he'll buy me this and he'll buy me that. But when he didn't, I was pissed at first. But now that I look back, it was the best thing that ever happened.
Look what Charles.
Yeah, it probably was, man. It probably was. And, that's actually, it's funny, Charles, that you say that, because there's a joke, and my buddy Joe Foreman is Afro Man, and he always used to have this song about having the white boy drive so that we don't get pulled over as much. And I swear to God, that's a real song that he has. So anybody who has a problem with that, go listen to the song. Like my friend wrote the song. It's funny. And so I would always like drive the car during the day. And like, we never had problems. There'd be like a cop behind us. I'm like, oh, we're good. He's like, we good. White boys driving. So it was kind of a joke that we had. We all had this like joke. It got the collared shirt on, the khaki pants.
That's freaking awesome.
The New Balance shoes. Those guys were like, dude, you literally look like a frat boy every time you go on stage, but it seems to work for you. So great. But yeah, my dad telling me no was a blessing. I just didn't know it until years and years down the line, because he's like, listen, I could buy this kid everything he wants, but is that really going to get him the results down the line that he needs?
Right.
And so while I was pissed at first, he upended his end of the bargain. He paid for me to get the education, helped me get the corporate gig. And then I had everything I needed up here. Yeah. I just had to now convert that in the real world and turn that into an actual business model. And so that took quite a while because I didn't really know anything about business. I was just a people person. Right. That's why people in those productions, like the Tom Petty's or the teams that worked with Madonna or the teams that worked with Aerosmith or whoever else, liked having me in that like production manager position. It wasn't because I knew anything about audio. It's because I had fun and made everybody feel good. They played better when I was checking my guitar and checking all the lines on the thing, making up songs about we're in freaking Red Rocks, Colorado. Like, this guy's hilarious. This guy gives us zero stress walking onto that stage, because if it works for his dumb ass, it's definitely going to work for us. He's a great production manager. And so, oh my God, him saying no and forcing me to go against the book was kind of like the challenge that I needed to accelerate and be willing to do anything to get the job done. And that led to me accepting the fact that I had to get out of those bar venues. I had to quit drinking alcohol. I had to quit roasting blunts in the alleyway with the homies. And there's nothing wrong with those guys. They paved the way for me to be successful, and they gave me those opportunities. But that lifestyle, I had to cut it.
Yeah.
At 34, 35 years old, I was finally getting around the Cardones and the Brad Lees and the Kevin Harringtons and the whoever else. And it's just like, if you really want to turn this into like an agency, you got to cut out certain things that are toxic to your potential overall success. And so those are decisions you have to make.
Was there a time along this? Because you said this was, circa 2004, 2005 ish?
So 2004, 2005, I graduated from the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, and I moved to Vegas.
Okay.
Yes, dude, Charles, great dad. And so I worked for that company till about 2007. I always think it's longer. I always think it's like 2010, or it's not. It was like 2 big summers of doing all the biggest shows. And I was like, all right, well, I've literally reached the pinnacle of sound guy stuff. I think we even did a couple Rush shows, which in my opinion, Rush is technically one of the best technical musical bands in the history of the planet. And this is with the original lineup.
First concert.
Original lineup with Neil Peart. They shredded my face off, and they were still kind of old, and they busted my face off. It was like 07, summer 07 or something like that.
Dude, they were, I saw them in 1984, exit stage left, man. They were, dude,
I would actually argue that the guitar player for Rush is one of the most underrated guitar players in the history of rock and roll.
Amen. Totally agree.
Ridiculous. But my point was that I had gotten around some of the best players and some of the best songwriters and the best personas or characters in the entire industry. And, we did Warped Tour too. And so that's where I met Joe and I met Coolio. They rapped on Warped Tour main stages. Wow. And so those were the guys that I had access to. So when he dropped the hammer on me and said, hey, I'm not bankrolling this thing, I had to call in the cavalry and be like, all right, well, who can I work with? And this is a lesson for everybody. Who can you call when the game's on the line that's a little bit up here that can help you accelerate your progress to go to here? And that's what I called those guys for. My buddy Coolio has a draw. My buddy Afro Man, they have draws. And so while it might not have necessarily been my quote unquote genre, I had to adapt to that genre, or what happens? It's like I'm dead in the water. So you better figure out how to rap.
Dude.
Or, and here's the secret, or use something that somebody's already done, remix it a little bit, and then use that. And that's exactly what I did. So I'd play like Gin and Juice. I'd walk out there and I'd start just playing Gin and Juice real slow. And everybody knew that song. Right. And then I'd switch. It was all one song. So I would use the same 4 chords and I would go between like 20 different songs in 9 minutes. So it was like a DJ remix, almost like an EDM DJ would do now. And so I'd play some Gin and Juice, and I'd flip into Blackstreet, No Diggity, and then I'd flip into Usher, Yeah, and like do the Ludacris rap, and then I'd flip back into Gin and Juice. And Fish does this. The Grateful Dead did this really well. They call it sandwiching songs. They call it making a song sandwich. And so I would build these sandwiches. You got a little salami, you got a little bologna, maybe a little bit more salami there. And by the time it got to 8 minutes, I would bring those Guy. I am the Joe. And so, adapting and figuring out how you're going to use your skills to match what the marketplace demands. Here's the other thing. What I wrote and what I sang was not what was hot in the marketplace. What Joe Fro, Afro Man, sang, and what Coolio sang, and what Cypress Hill sang, that was what the marketplace was demanding. That's what those people were there to hear. So how am I going to mold and morph my little acoustic set to match that kind of energy, to match that kind of delivery? Well, I had to kind of sing, rap a little bit more. And so, I was mixing in the Nelly and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of a cover skit.
Wow.
But I think that's an important thing, because like right now, the live music industry is roasted. It's done right now. But the fact that I transitioned out of those bars, and we were kind of talking about this a little bit before, into running a digital agency where we do podcasting and we're doing micro content for people. I saw my biggest months during the pandemic when the entire California music industry was shut down.
I definitely want to get into that. I think that if you look back, there was a moment after your dad said good luck,
figure it out.
Was there a moment that was kind of pivotal for you where you were like, okay, I think I'm getting somewhere? I mean, dude, opening for Coolio is kind of a big deal. Like that's a pretty big deal. But I mean, was there a moment where you're like, okay, I'm getting it, and I'm making more money now than I was in that corporate gig?
Yeah. So the first few years with the band were pretty rough because I was still figuring everything out, but I was able to lean on friends. Like I mentioned, my buddy Brad always gave me a little couch to sleep on, and he never really used his computer other than to like listen to Guns N' Roses songs. He was like a couple of years older than me. No offense to you Guns N' Roses guys, love him too. But it was just interesting because he never used his computer to like create marketing or to create audio files or to create photo files or posters or anything. And so I would always like go and I'd look up and do all this research on what we needed to download. And I'd be like, hey man, I mean, this little program is only like $4.99, but dude, look at all the stuff I can make with it. And he's like, you made that? I'm like, yeah, but the free trial's up. And he'd be like, oh dude, just put it on the Apple account. That was one of those guys that understood what my long-term vision was. Whether he was going to play bass for my band forever or not, in his head didn't matter, because he was like, saw the potential. I'm honest, not like stealing stuff out of his house or anything, but it's just like he could see the vision. And that's probably part of the reason why he's in a lot of pictures with me playing bass at like Six Flags or, big venues here in Texas or wherever, because he saw that vision and was like, dude, you can definitely turn this into something. I'm just along for the ride.
So you started hitting your stride though. You really started.
Yeah. I would say the pivotal moment was when it's sad, but when I quit doing that band and started focusing on Pat, and then booked Pat 4 or 5 nights a week in St. Louis, and I was charging $100-$200 a night. That's when I was like actually getting paid to do Pat and market Pat and get paid to be Pat. And that was when, I mean, in St. Louis, I did 6-7 nights a week for about 3 years. So from like 2011, 12, 13, I was doing like 6-7 nights a week. And it was like, I would DJ, I would play guitar, I would do whatever they needed. So that was another thing too. While I wanted to just play the guitar, the marketplace of the St. Louis West County area that I was marketing myself in, they wanted DJs. So, okay, you guys want me to click on songs? It's way easier than playing anything. So
Right.
a lot of people that like know me from then were like, man, like you were such a great DJ. And in my head, I'm like, DJ? I'm not really a DJ. I'm just Pat. It was just, to me, it was just a sound gig.
Yeah.
Because when you know where I came from,
Right.
that all I'm doing is plugging in an output into a speaker system and clicking on play. And the funny thing about me as a DJ is I'm like really not that good at like running a turntable system. So
Right.
I'll make announcements and be like, hey, everybody, hope you're having fun. If you want to hear a song, just come up and let me know. And what I would do, dude, is I would run Spotify. So Spotify has every song on the freaking planet, right? So people would come up and be like, dude, will you play this Tyga song, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sure. And I would just drag it into the playlist. Hey, will you play this Skrillex song? Just drag it into the playlist. So my playlist was based on what the audience actually wanted, not what I wanted to listen to. As a DJ.
Amen, dude. That is a business lesson.
Come on, dude. All
For
you
everybody.
DJs out there that are like, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear what they want to hear. Now, if that's part of the song, great. More power to you. But
Right.
like creators have this problem where they think that what they create has to be what everyone wants, when in reality, people want what they want. And as a creator, your job is to deliver that.
That's true for, look, if Grant Cardone, who's done 5 10X growth cons now, if he delivered a bunch of crap that people didn't want or need,
Right.
he wouldn't be doing number 6.
No way.
He wouldn't. And
No
so
way.
it goes for every business, like deliver what your customers want.
It's so true. And as creators, we've got to know that. And so over the course of the years, I was in St. Louis for a while, and then I moved to San Diego for a while because San Diego kind of played to that play guitar thing a lot more than St. Louis, because it's a little more hippy dippy, play your guitar, by the beach and sing songs and stuff like that. But
Right.
even in that scenario, people wanted to hear Steve Miller, or people wanted to hear the Beatles, or people wanted to hear that. I still had to learn what people wanted to hear, not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily the Pat Hilton show. It was me playing what those people wanted. And here's another lesson. The 6 to 8 crowd likes something different than the 8:07 to 10 o'clock crowd. Okay. So like these moms and families would come in. I can't be just effing and GDing and shitting all over the place in the middle of dinner hour. They're never going to have me back.
Right.
But at like 7:42, when those people left and the drinking crowd came in, okay, well, now it's a free for all.
Right.
And now I can play the whole Coolio list and the whole Afro Man list. But again, you have to understand what those two different dynamics look like.
Yep.
Whether you're a DJ or a songwriter or a podcaster or whatever, I'm not necessarily sure that your crowd wants to hear me drop a whole bunch of MFs this whole entire time. So, I'm kind of holding off on that because number one, I understand that it doesn't necessarily fit everything I say. But
Right.
number two, some people, oh, dude, I've played the Catalyst in Santa Cruz. We used to play at the Catalyst in Santa Cruz, this big auditorium. We did that with Afro Man and Coolio. I believe we did it with Cypress Hill, maybe not, but I've played there many times. That's one of my favorite towns in California. It's not cheap, but boy, it's fun. But that was the thing that I really started to learn was the more I just do what people ask me to do, the more money I make. The more people like me, the more people want me to come back. And I could always fit my thing in there anyway. You know what I'm saying? But it never got the same response. So if you want to get paid, you got to give the people what they want.
At some point you met your wife. We haven't even talked about that.
So in 2011 or so, she's going to be like, oh my God, we met in this year. But in 2011 or so, I was doing a gig. I would DJ and my buddy would ask trivia questions. And so we booked it as like trivia dance night. So like we would do trivia from like, again, like 8 to 10. And then I would DJ from like 10 to 12. And then like the bar closed at like 1 anyway.
Yeah.
So like it turned it into like a double gig kind of thing. And she showed up on like Thanksgiving night or something, drinking with my cousin. And so that's how we met at Fraley's Pub. It was love at first sight.
And this was in California?
This was in St. Louis.
Oh.
And then when I moved to California, get this. So when I moved to California, we moved into an apartment together. That was like the first time I ever had a place to live. And then she had good credit and a job. So so we were living together for like a couple of years. And this was when I was traveling and doing those tours.
Yeah.
And then I was like, man, if I really wanted, I remember calling her from San Diego. Yeah, Catalyst is a great club. I called her from San Diego when I was on tour with Afro Man and was like, if I really want to do this big, I got to get out of St. Louis because it's too comfortable. I'm also noticing that like that whole bar market is starting to change. So we're going to have to make some, adjustments here, and we're going to have to figure out what this looks like moving forward. And I just don't think it includes me being in St. Louis right now. And so I packed up. She's like, okay, that's fine. I can pack up my stuff and move into my parents' house while you figure out San Diego and get an apartment, but you got to figure it out. Wow. So I came back home from that tour. This was like 2013. And we packed up all our stuff and moved her into her parents' house. And then I moved out to San Diego and started sleeping on people's floors again to get full-time gigs in California, which after about 3 or 4 months of me crushing every single open mic in San Diego and every farmer's market, I would play the farmer's markets, bro, to make $40 or something and like free food, and got it to a point where I was doing 5 or 6 shows a week. And then she transferred her job out to San Diego and we moved into a place and got engaged. And, we lived in that little 1-bedroom apartment for like 3 straight years till like, I don't know, 2016 or 2017. When was that Growth Con? 2018.
Was it 18, 16,
2016? I don't even remember anymore. But the moral of the story was, I remember we were living in that little 1-bedroom apartment. She was pregnant with our first kid. And I was like, all right, well, you got to figure out how to get around some high level people or this thing isn't going to last. You've been in this situation before where you had to adapt. What are we going to do to get around some people that are just plain better than you at business? And this, again, creators struggle with this because they don't want to admit that anybody's better than them at anything. They think that they're the best at everything they do. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. You can still be the best at what you do and not be the best at everything. So, anyway, I told you the story of, he posted this thing on the internet of, hey, if you're a creator, make me something on Instagram or whatever. I'm like, oh, this is game over. Picked up the guitar, whipped up a little jingle, played it. I sent it to Elena, and she's the one that got it to Grant, and he shared that all over his pages. It got like hundreds of thousands of views on his channels. And I'm like, oh shit, dude. If I can get on stage at this guy's 10X conference, it is game over. That's the move I need right now. And so I kept making more and more and more and more songs. He kept sharing them. I start calling the office and emailing the office and messaging him on Instagram. And I'm like, dude, you got to let me play. Just let me play the lunch breaks, bro. Let me play 10 minutes on the lunch break when nothing's going on. And he's like, yeah. And he never said no. He's like, hey, man, reach out to Sherry Hamilton or reach out to Dave Robards or he's bouncing me all over the freaking office. Reach out to Steve Spray or whatever. And I'm like, dude, all you got to do is tell me yes. Just tell me yes. And this is where, again, gut check time, right? So my wife's pregnant. I'm trying to close this deal. I'm like a nobody who plays full-time in bar corners in San Diego. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to close this guy? Like, I got to close this deal.
Wow.
And pops up on my my news feed, it was like an advertisement, like a paid ad. And it was like the Thrive Make Money Matter event is happening in Las Vegas this weekend. And if you buy a ticket to 10X, you get a free ticket to Thrive to see Elena speak in Las Vegas. And I'm like, Las Vegas. Let's see here. San Diego to Las Vegas, 4.2 hours. I'm like, we're driving to Vegas this weekend, baby. Come on. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, we're going to drive to Vegas. We're going to break into the event and we're going to close Grant Cardone face to face. She's like, you've lost your mind. You're out of your mind. I'm like, here's the deal. You can stay here and chill and relax. I'll go get the deal done. She's like, no, I'm not sitting here by myself with this baby in my stomach. If we're going to close Grant Cardone, then we're going to close Grant Cardone. And I'm like, yeah. It was like a freaking Braveheart moment. That's when you know you found the right woman. You're out there.
That is so awesome.
Like, if we're going to die for this, we're going to die together. So we drove to freaking Vegas. We had no money. We stayed at the shittiest hotel. It's called the Best Western. Do not stay at the Best Western across the street from Mandalay Bay. Save yourself. Please trust me. It's terrible.
Oh my God. With
so
your
we're staying.
pregnant wife.
My pregnant wife is smoky. It was disgusting. We ate Denny's. It was gross. And so we roll into this Hard Rock Cafe joint to close this guy, right? I had messaged Elena earlier in the day so that they didn't think I was completely psycho, even though I am. And I said, hey, we happen to be in Vegas this weekend. I know I've been following up a lot, but I wanted to talk to you guys about me playing at the lunch break. Maybe we could catch up and meet each other. And Elena, being the angel that she is, well, we have a really busy day today, and I do have to speak tomorrow, but we will be at the Hard Rock for a VIP mastermind later this evening. There might be a chance you could catch Grant in between some of his activities then. And I'm like, damn it, she likes me. Damn it, she's good. Damn it. You're a good woman, Elena. Yeah. And so we rolled up, right? Since he used to be like, if you're a hustler, come see me, come say hi. He doesn't do that anymore. No, I think this was the final straw for Cardone giving away his location. You give your location away to James Bond, you're in trouble. And so, hey, we're up here at the mastermind at the X amount suite at the Hard Rock Cafe. All the VIPs are here. If you ain't here, you ain't a hustler. Come on. And I'm like, oh, dude, this guy is just throwing me softballs. Wow. I mean, I've been backstage with Tom Petty. I know how to get around in a venue. So my wife and I roll up the escalator, right, to get up to this scenario. And there's like security stacked up at the top of the escalator. And I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. Hey, so I'm actually here. I'm just catching Grant Cardone real quick, and then we're out of here. Blah 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 blah. And they're like, dude, if your name, what's your name? And I'm like, looking at the list. I'm like, Pat Hilton, and he's like, yeah, man, you're not on the list. Looks like you don't have a wristband. I can't let you in. And I'm like,
oh God, we stayed at the Best Western for this.
So I go back down the escalator, and my wife's like waiting on the other side of the Hard Rock because it's so smoky.
Yeah, right.
And she kind of looks at me and she like gives me one of these, and I'm like, no, guys. She's like, we gotta go. That's ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, dude, this is not going well right now. There's no way that this is happening. I got to get up there somehow. And my buddy Frank, I hear that somebody yelling because, again, I played tons of conferences for free up until this point, by the way. Traveled all over playing conferences for free with the guitar. And I hear somebody yelling the name of one of my songs. And I'm like, oh, my God, where is that coming from? And it's my buddy Frank. He's got this big, huge beard, Frank Sell. He's probably on your Facebook page.
Yeah,
he sells Frank. Like Hustle Coffee or whatever. Yeah. And he's like, dude, what are you even doing here? And I'm like, listen to me, Frank. Okay. Listen. Yeah, he's like, what's wrong with you? Did you start smoking again? I'm like, very calmly, Frank. I need you to take your green wristband off. I need you to put it around my wrist. And I need you to walk with me past that security guy. that guy right there, Brian. Brian is trying to stop God from the plan that he has for my family. And he's like, dude, here you go. He's like, we're on the list. Are you having a problem getting up there? I'm like, all I need to do, Frank, is close Grant Cardone on 10X2. He's like, did you drive all the way here to close Grant Cardone? Because I had already told him months ago at some other conference that I'm going to close Grant Cardone, and he's seen the videos. Like,
yeah, right.
He knows what's happening. He's like, oh, dude, this is epic. You want me to film it? I'm like, don't film anything. People will see it when I shred the lunch break in half.
Right.
All I have to do is get to Grant Cardone right now. So he gives me his green wristband.
Oh my God.
Ocean's 11 style. I roll past security, like in his mob of people that are on the list. I'm like, whoop, whoop. Oh, can't see me now. See me now. Can't see me now. Whoa. And so I'm in there hiding behind like a pillar, like with my like back to the pillar. And like, I see them like 3 minutes later come out of the mastermind room, and I just pop out from behind the pillar, and I'm like, Uncle G, what's up, man? It's Pat Hilton, dude. I'm here to talk to you about the lunch break. And I can see Elena's like walking out a little bit behind him, and I can see her face be like, oh my God. He actually got in somehow. And I made sure I like kept my hands up like this just because, I don't know, just throwing that out there. Hey, here they are. Hey, dude. So, man, let's make this happen, bro. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm feeding the beast. I'm like reciting lines from all his book. Like, I'm obsessed. I'm not average. I'm 10X and baby, let's go. And he like kind of looks around, and there's like a bunch of people now that are seeing that know me from Facebook and stuff. And they're like, dude, Pat Hilton, dude, you got to give him the deal. Uncle G, let him play. Let him play, Uncle G. And he's like, hey, you guys think I should let him play? You know, he's got like a little Southern thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Hey, y'all think I should let him play? Hey, spit some freestyles for me real quick. Come on, spit some freestyles for me. And I like start like rapping on his Instagram story. And I like crushed a couple lines, and people are like, oh. And then he like spits a couple lines. They're like horrible lines, but everyone's like, oh, Uncle G. Oh.
That's awesome,
you know what I mean? Like
dude.
he could say anything and people would cheer for it.
Right.
But Elena kind of gets to us, and I kind of like look at her, and I kind of look at him. And now by this point, like my wife's standing at the escalator, like we're leaving. And I'm like, dude, so in all realness, like my wife and I drove here. She's standing over there. She's pregnant with our child. We live in a small 1-bedroom apartment. I play 5-6 nights a week. I'm like getting emotional shit. I'm like starting to cry, and I need this gig. Nobody takes my thing serious. You said the songwriting thing was brilliant. I've been doing this since I was a little kid, dude, making up songs and learning theme songs and stuff. And like, this is it. Like, I just know that if you give me this opportunity just to play the lunch breaks, people will take me seriously. It'll change the trajectory of not only my business, but my entire life.
Wow.
And I kind of looked at her, and she kind of looked at him and looked back at me and like gave me one of these. And I'm like, what does any of this mean? She's like, I just love what you're doing. And he kind of looked at her again. She was like that whole, are you going to tell him yes? And he was like, hey man, you got the gig, man. You got the gig. And he gave me the damn gig, and he let me play. I didn't have a contract. I didn't have a contract or anything, just a handshake. I took a quick picture with him. I thanked him, and I left.
Wow.
By my word, all I'm here to do is close this deal.
That's awesome.
You know, my wife had to walk through the whole smoky hotel. This is what it takes, dude. This is what you talk about. And so I got the deal. I played that gig. I got sober because I was still playing in the bars, drinking and smoking a ton of weed. I'll just be real with it.
Yeah.
Then I'm over 920 days sober now. And my digital marketing agency, we're doing, you know, we're going to do 6 figures this year, which for me, that's a huge step. Considering we were barely paying the bills a few years ago in a little 1-bedroom apartment. I got my own little custom studio set up here. And I mean, things are rolling, bro. But like it all comes down, and there's a movie called Every Given Sunday. And there's this Al Pacino speech in that movie. If you don't watch anything from that movie, look up Al Pacino Every Given Sunday speech. And he talks about how the inches that we need are all around us. I don't think that there's anything more true than that, because while everyone else in the San Diego music scene, this might sound harsh, was either playing at the bar, doing the same thing, or taking the weekend off and hanging out on the beach that weekend, we were out closing a deal in Vegas when we had no money.
You
That's the
know,
difference between the people that make it big and the people that stay in the same place. We were willing to die for that opportunity.
Grant watches, I don't know about all of, but most of my shows. So I'm sure he's going to see this.
That
And
whole
dude,
scenario changed everything for our entire family. We have 2 kids now. We're doing better than we've ever done before. I mean, you've been following me for a while, dude. This has not been some kind of, easy gold rush story. We have a long way to go, but we're going to get there because those inches, we're willing to fight for those inches. That's the big lesson.
Let me ask you a question. First off, listening to your story took me back to 2014 when I went, I got to do whatever it takes. Todd Straw was my rep. Steve and Todd closed me back in the day. And I was like, dude, I got to meet with Grant. And he's like, yeah, that's not happening, dude. I'm like, I spend $1,000 a month with you guys. What are you talking about? And he's like, bro, Grant, no offense, man, but Grant could drop $1,000 on the ground and not even care to stop and pick it up.
Right.
I'm like, so that wasn't the angle, but I did figure it out. And it really, dude, your story is so freaking unbelievably intense. Let me ask you this question. What do you think? And this, I ask these 2 questions to every single person on the show. Number one, what do you think, in your opinion, holds people back from real success and happiness in life?
I think that when people start to feel scared, or they start to feel pain, or they start to get uncomfortable, or they start to think, hey, maybe this is a long shot. They, instead of accelerating in those moments, they peel back into the corner. And then what happens is that they take more hits. They take more shots. I relate a lot of entrepreneur and success. I grew up watching ESPN classic boxing with my dad. Yeah. And we sat around and watched all these Muhammad Ali fights, Mike Tyson, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, the Roberto Durans, the Floyd Mayweathers, and all these matchups. And what I noticed about the Haglers or the Alis, the biggest guys that I thought were the best, and rest in peace, Marvelous Marvin just passed away, by the way, but was when they were cut or they were hurt, they almost got more aggressive and better, and they would put you away quicker, because once they got uncomfortable and they started to feel pain, they knew that they're already in pain, so they might as well get a reward for it, right?
Yeah.
I'm already cut. They're either going to stop this thing. If you watch the Marvin Hagler versus Tommy Hearns fight, they're either going to stop the fight or I'm going to knock this guy's head through the ropes. And I think that that's the way we have to think, is that, like, when you're hurt or you're down on cash, the only way out of that is to accelerate and to find solutions. Going back into the corner and hiding and covering up is not the solution. You've got to land more punches. You've got to put points on the scoreboard. And I think that people get scared and they cower in the corner instead of saying, okay, well, hit me a couple more times, because the one I'm going to hit you with is going to end this entire thing. And so that was the way I always looked at it, is, okay, well, if you're at this level and you're sucking, well, that means you got to go to this level. And then you get to that level and you're like, all right, well, this is starting to suck again. And then that level almost goes back to, well, this is only like a 4 of my potential. And so then you raise it up a little more, but then that struggle kind of starts to come back. Cause with it's like an old Notorious B.I.G. line, like more money, more problems, more success, more issues, more pain, more resilience. Like, the more hits you take, the better you get at shaking off those punches or rolling off those punches in life. And the harder of a blow you're able to deliver as a power shot. And so I think that it's all about momentum. I had already built a ton of momentum going into meeting that dude. I had closed Madonna's team, Tom Petty's team, the Aerosmith team on just Pat. If you go back and you look at the story, he didn't book the guitar guy that night. He booked me. The real me, the guy that said, I'm willing to die to get this opportunity because it's going to change my life. If you're really about the hustler, if you're really about the guy that's willing to do anything, he's standing right in front of you. And I'm not going away. It's either yes or no. I can handle whichever one you're going to give me, but I need a final answer now. My wife is going to kill me regardless.
She walked through smoke, pregnant.
And so I think that most people will message a Cardone or make a song for a Cardone or do this. They land a couple shots. They're ahead on points. But when it gets into the frickin' what we call championship rounds, round 10, 11, and 12, when you're dog tired and your eyes busted and the game's on the line, like how hard are you throwing shots then?
Right.
Because that's when the bad mofos show up and knock people out. And so I think that while I'd love to be able to be a first to third round KO artist, most of us aren't.
Right. No.
It takes 12 rounds to get the victory, man.
It does.
And so
man.
I think that's the difference. I think people are really excited when they start any journey like this, like the 75 hard thing, like it's day 9. I got to stay as excited on day 9 as I am on day 70, or I'm not going to get the results that I want out of the program.
Yep.
I have to be excited today, just like I was when I was 26 years old, sleeping on Brad Griffin's floor, or I'm not going to get the job done today.
Amen. God.
So I think it's a gut check, and that's why I think it's not for everybody.
I interestingly enough, I mean, you started talking a little bit about 2020 and everything that happened, and I think and this leads into my last question for you, but I remember a time when one of my employees walked in my office and said, "Hey, there's a dude looking in the windows of your SUV out in the parking lot." And I'm like, "Bro, you're like 3 times my size. Go out there and kick his ass." I mean, why are you telling me? And he goes, "Well, he's got it blocked with his tow truck." I was like, "Oh, no." And it was like this bad day, man. I'll never forget that moment. Like all my employees were getting paid, but I wasn't. And I'm sitting there going, this life is over. Like, this sucks.
Right.
And a lot of people in 2020, man, they crashed and burned. The suicide rates went through the freaking roof. And there's still residual problems for people.
Absolutely.
What do you say to somebody that's barely hanging on by a thread and they're saying, "Pat, I've done everything I freaking know how to do and it's not working. I can't feed my family. I'm struggling. My car was repoed. The electric's getting shut off." What would you say to that person to give them hope to get them through to the next moment?
Well, something that you said I think is important. I think that sometimes we feel like we've done everything. I think there's always something else that we can do. So while I've been in that situation where I've done everything with this guitar thing, I played at the 10X event, I did this and that and the other thing. Okay, well, what have you done with the podcasting thing? What have you done with offering social media management? You're clearly really good at managing your social media, or you wouldn't have gotten those gigs. Sometimes you have to look at what you haven't offered and make that the offer. There's a skill or a strength that you have that you are overlooking because to you, maybe it just feels like a routine or just something that you do as a habit. It's just something I got to do. Well, it's something everyone has to do. Everyone should be updating their social media and everyone should be on interviews like what Ken's doing. Everyone should be doing this. I was already doing it as a musician, live streaming. Why don't I take this, put myself in a corner box and start talking about real estate, which I know nothing about, with an expert that can answer people's questions. And now all of a sudden I took myself from broke musician to paid producer. You've got to think in those situations, what's the solution? What am I doing that did work, that got me here? And how can I utilize that skill, but just shift it over 2, 3, 4%? And now, boom, you blow through the hole, because the hole's here. The hole's here. It's stopping you. The obstacle's here. How do I get around it? Just a little shift, man. Little shit. Now you can see my face. Now you can't. If I keep hammering here, this isn't working. You can't see me. This isn't working. You can't see me. But I'm like, okay, well, what if I just shift just a little bit over to here? Well, now the vision, it opens up and you jump through. So this is something Brad Lee taught me, by the way, is that sometimes you've got to set things down to pick up the next thing that's coming to you. And so for me, that was the guitar. This guitar thing's great, dude. You're awesome. I mean, you can like pick up a guitar and like make a song up. Like it's crazy, but I think you're kind of hanging on to it a little too much. You need to set that down and pick up all these other skills that got those guitar gigs booked. How'd you get booked with Coolio? I'm like, oh, well, I mean, I like sold tickets and did marketing and made videos and voiceovers and all this. It's like, had nothing to do with the guitar, did it? I'm like,
right.
No, that's your business.
Yeah.
That's your shift. Now we're a digital marketing agency and we're about to, we're on the cusp of onboarding some new clients that are huge, massive. And it's like,
good for you. 3
years ago, I had to make a decision that it's not all about the guitar because I was hitting that same roadblock. Even after 10X, I'm like, dude, I'm playing 6-7 nights a week, banging my head against the wall. I'm still in the drunk stoner environment. What am I going to do? That conversation, that thought process, I think even Russell Brunson mentioned, or Kevin Anson. I think I was in an event with Russell Brunson, and Kevin Anson is a video guy who you should have on the show. He's great, by the way. And he was like, dude, you just got to make a menu. Like you're only selling the double cheeseburger right now. You got to have a milkshake and a French fries and a chicken sandwich and a turkey sandwich. You've got all these skills, but you're only going for this one thing that you like to do. You got to expand it. Me doing this right now is almost the same as playing a live music gig. It's just I don't have a guitar plugged in.
Well, and you get on shows like this. I mean, I'm being interviewed later today too. And, you get on shows like this and it's what Grant says. Money follows attention. You got to get attention. And I'm going to do something. I have a digital marketing agency too, but dude, we live in a world of massive abundance. So what's your website? I'm going to pop it up on screen.
It's acousticforcemedia.com, or you can check out
ACOU.
How about just PatHilton.com, and you can click to social media services from there. How about that? PatHilton.com, PatHilton.com.
See, I love it. You made it easy for me.
But that's the thing. It's just like I had to adapt. And so I would say to anyone who's in that situation, they're banging their head against the wall. It's like, okay, well, what got me here? And how can I use those skills to like break out into different categories of what I'm good at and kind of create new opportunities? Like Ernest just said, it's just like, man,
just got to keep going, man.
Assess, revamp, make things better, find new solutions, use those skills, remix those skills, just like I did with the guitar. I was like a classic rock singer, but I'm like, I can use these same notes to remix rap tunes to play to this audience that's completely different from my background. And it totally worked because I was willing to adapt. That's the name of the game.
It's freaking awesome, dude. Where's the best place for everybody to follow you on social? Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to PatHilton.com, it's got all the links. We got a podcast show we do called Business and Buds. We should definitely get you on there to chat sometime. And we do a lot of social media for people. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm everywhere. I encourage people to take advantage of these platforms. They are free to use. And whether you use a social media management company or not, there's a lot of free tools you can use to automate your process. I encourage everybody to look into that. There's free resources like buffer.com, Hootsuite, a lot of different apps that you can download to post to multiple platforms at one time. And some people would say, oh, I need to be reformatting and doing this different. Well, if you're posting nothing, then just post the same thing because it's better than nothing. So while I do agree with that argument to a certain degree, it's like, well, if you're posting nothing and you're saying, I need to be posting different stuff on all platforms, just post something. So
Dude,
name of the
yeah,
game is attention. Like you said, use these social media platforms
have
as,
to,
as like
man.
batting practice for getting better at writing copy, getting better at getting on camera, getting better at writing songs or drawing or being the landscape expert or whatever it is that you want to do. Pick up your camera and like be that expert for people.
Dude, amazing, absolutely freaking mind-blowing interview. You're literally you're a real life rock star, dude.
Hey, you know, it worked out so
Yeah,
far.
and it still is, man. I'm honored that you. I want to say thank you for coming on, and I'm honored you took the time and invested so much energy and wisdom to everybody watching and listening. So, and thank you to everyone who's watched and shared this out. If you shared this out, there are extra gold fixtures for you in heaven or something. I don't know, but
They're
thank you
out there for you. They're out there for you.
yeah, dude. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate it.
Stay with me. Don't hang up on me. We'll be right back. I'm going to close this out. Thank you guys. We'll see you guys all tomorrow. Have a great day.